at 5, as we are every Thursday.
Well, we're a bit late actually.
Yeah, we are a little
Sorry.
It's 15:15. Just before we start asking the questions, can everybody hear us? If you drop a thumbs up if you can hear us, or let us know in the chat if you can't.
Well, they're not going to, if they can't hear us, they're not going to know to let us know.
Yeah.
Hopefully, just give us some thumbs up if you can hear us, please. That would be great. It would be really helpful. If you can hear us, just drop us that, hit that little thumb icon. Perfect. Thank you.
So without further ado, we'll crack on with the questions. These ones are from a more lettings perspective. The first one being from Landlords about, so they're thinking of letting the property. How do they begin that process?
The first thing I would do if I was looking at renting my property out would be to try and speak to a professional. We're going to talk about some of the regulations that are involved in letting shortly, so I won't go into any of that, but I think it's one of those areas where you do need professional advice. So if you're thinking of renting your property, the exact wrong thing to do would be stick it on Facebook and let somebody move into it. So I would be thinking, if you're living in your house at the moment or you've got a property that is empty, take some professional advice would be my first starting point. Get all of that advice and then go from there. So yeah, speak to a professional letting agent or estate agent who can give you the advice of the next steps, because we're going to talk about regulations in a minute. I can go through some of those, but that's just the absolute starting point. Get some professional advice.
Yeah. So the next question is actually somebody who's seeking our advice and wants to know what do they actually need in place to let a property. So with regards to regulations, what do they actually by law need, I suppose?
I'm just hoping that my battery doesn't die. If my battery dies, I'm really sorry. So what do they need to have in place regulation-wise to let the property? There are so many pieces of legislation around letting, something like 162. It's a phenomenal amount, which is why I mentioned about seeking professional advice regarding those legislations. A couple of really quick ones that you'll need to rent a property the same way that you need when you sell a property. You need an energy performance certificate, or EPC as people abbreviate it to. So you can get one of those from an energy assessor who will come around and look at like the loft insulation, the double glazing on the windows, and tell you how energy efficient your property is. It has to be a certain rating as well. I think it's an E or above to rent a property, so you have to have it at a certain standard. You do need to have what's the word I'm looking for? Smoke alarms. And it's advised to have CO2 alarms as well, so you have to have that covered off. You have to have a gas safety check on all of your gas appliances, and now you also have to have an electrical test, easy for me to say, an electrical safety test done every 5 years, I think it is as well. So those would be the absolute basics that you'll need to. You have to get your property fit to rent, and those are the ways that you do it. And that's all legislation that's come in probably in the last 10 years.
How long can a landlord rent a property for? Or I suppose how long can a tenant rent a property for?
Yeah, a lot of people ask us, particularly when someone's selling a property and they want a short-term rental. A lot of people do talk to us and say, well, I'll just rent for a couple of months. But actually, you can't just rent for a couple of months. You have to rent. For it to be an assured short-hold tenancy agreement, you have to rent for a period of 6 months. So you can have an assured short-hold tenancy from 6 months to 3 years, but anything shorter than 6 months isn't an assured short-hold. So the answer really to the question is 6 months minimum. We do first contracts for tenants at 6 months minimum. Sometimes people say, can we have 12 months? Our recommendation is always you stick with 6 to start with, to make sure that firstly that you like the tenants, secondly that the tenants like the property. So normally 6 months. We've actually had an increase in sellers selling their house and moving into sort of Airbnb short term, and I think that's probably anything under 6 months you'd probably be looking at an Airbnb type solution.
The next question is regarding the government deposit scheme. What is that?
Another piece of legislation. And this comes from years ago, landlords with poor ethics would basically take the deposit and just take it and never give it back to the tenants. So tenants lodge a deposit to make sure that they return the house in the same condition with fair wear and tear that they took the property in. And if they make any damage, then you take money out of the deposit. Now, because landlords were abusing that, the government came up with this government deposit scheme. And the government deposit scheme is where, as letting agents or as landlords as well, you have to lodge the tenant's deposit in an approved government scheme. So then you have, if you want to take money out of that deposit, you have to demonstrate why. So this government scheme has been set up to protect the tenants from the landlords just taking the deposit. And if you aren't correctly lodging the deposit under the terms of those schemes, then there are big fines that landlords can pay. I think it's 3 times the deposit that they have to pay back to the tenant if they don't lodge the deposit correctly. So it's a government held scheme. You can Google it, you can set up your own accounts fairly easily online, but it's really important that those deposits are lodged correctly.
Okay, our final question for today is, what are the different services that we offer for landlords?
I'm talking a lot. So we have a range of different services for landlords, whereby the most popular is probably where we fully manage the process. So literally a landlord gives us their keys and says, can you rent the property? We become the tenant's main point of contact for paying the rent, for managing the property in terms of maintenance. So if there's a leak, we'll get one of our contractors to sort that out. So we offer the fully managed service that's completely hands-off for landlords, and that's where I would really advise any inexperienced landlords start. We also have a rent collection scheme, so if you don't want to get bogged down in the hassles of collecting and chasing rent, we can just do that for you. You can deal with all the maintenance side of things. And then finally, for the more experienced landlords, we also offer basically a find a tenant only service, whereby we advertise the property for rent, we set the tenancy up, and then it's over to you. You deal with the government deposit scheme, and then you deal with the ongoing tenant contact with regards to rent, maintenance, and all that. So it's kind of 3-tiered approach from you do it all, as in MovingWorks, we do it all. I'm talking just as a landlord. So MovingWorks do it all, MovingWorks just collect the rent, or the landlord does it all. So it's those range of services really.
Yeah. So that was our 5 live at just after 5.
We'll try to be on time next week.
Yeah, so tune in next week if you want to ask us a question, let us know, pop it in the chat or below this video, or even,
send us a message.
An email, yeah. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.